Welcome! Today I'm going to make some small spell dice. These are ones that I've made before using some mica powder. I'm going to make some similar ones but with alcohol inks this time. Sure, you can borrow dice from your friends and all that, but when you have to cast a really big fireball or a cone of cold or what have you, it's nice to have a bunch of dice, and the small ones are easier to carry around with you. So I made these cap molds. They're not my favorite, as you may or may not know. Cap molds are my least favorite type of mold, but for doing a lot of dice really quickly, this will work well for what I want it to do. It will be really quick, even though it may not be very pretty as far as the finish with the flashing that it leaves. You can of course do other dice, but I have found that typically the D6s and the D8s are the most heavily used, so those are the ones I'm going to do. The idea is to have red and blue with gold in the middle. I want to do about half of them with red on the bottom, half of them with blue on the bottom, and let it just naturally swirl on its own. I mean, they're small enough that I don't imagine it being a solid line, but we'll see. So I mix up my resin as per usual. Make sure that you mix at least 5 minutes, scraping the bottom and the sides. Pouring it back and forth from cup to cup also helps to get a good mixture. Once it's all mixed up, I pour it into the 3 separate cups to add my different colors. The gold, I tried mixing it a couple different times, but it doesn't exactly make a solid color so much as just kind of sit on the surface. But, I mean, it still looks cool. I like having a little bit of clear in my dice anyway. Just for good measure, I'm going to try and mix the gold again. It doesn't really mix in, but that's okay. Normally I would just pour my resin into my cap molds, but where these are so small, I'm going to use smaller pipettes to make sure that I can get a more accurate, or consistent, I guess, filling of half and half in the colors. And as I'm doing this, later I realize why I no longer use medicine cups and use the bigger cups, because after a while of using them, it falls over and spills, and I have to clean it up and then put them in bigger cups anyway. So just something to think about when you're using pipettes in cups. The weight can knock them over. No matter how many times you do it, there is always a chance of making a mess, so take every precaution with paper towels. My tray has a layer of silicone on it so that any resin that gets spilled on it can just be cured and then just peeled off later. Even though I spilled, I did just barely have enough to fill up the reservoirs on top, enough that there was no holes in it. After then putting it in the pressure pot overnight and then opening them up. With this particular mold, you want to either twist off those top sprues first, or you can cut them with some cutters if you have them. I prefer to twist them, but sometimes it's hard to get a hold of, so cutting them could be easier, but sometimes I cut into the mold. Just keep that in mind. Then you have all the flashing that you need to remove, and then you can pop them out. And it looks pretty good. It actually didn't mix near as much as I had expected it to. It's almost a solid line. But I did notice that the ones that had the red on the bottom, the blue, for some reason, sank through the red, so the blue is still on the bottom on all of them. It's just that the ones that had the red on the bottom are more mixed. Why? I don't know. Something to do with the color perhaps, because they're the same brand of alcohol ink. And I used the same amount of drops. But while I remove those, let me just tell you something really awesome. These really cool supporters. Man, you guys are the best. Thank you so much for your support. If you too would like to throw a couple dollars my way, feel free to check out the Patreon link in the description. Once I get all the dice out, I'm going to use my little cutters to cut off the little sprue nubs, and then later use a craft knife to shave it off as close to the base of the dice as I can, as well as the flashing on my flat edges. And then I can go ahead and get rid of those using some wet polishing paper. They look pretty good even with the little drop of gold in the middle, even though on some of them it may have sank with the blue, but all in all, they look like pretty good dice. So from the top left to the bottom right, I have the highest to lowest grit, and then I'm just going to go ahead and sand the sides and the edges until I can no longer see the sprue marks or flashing. Once they're all sanded, you could put them in a polisher with some polishing compound, or I'm just going to go ahead and paint them. So I'm going to use some gunmetal with some gold, and I like to get a wet paper towel to just wipe off the excess paint. I'm not a great painter, but I can sure fill in the number pretty well and then just wipe it off. Not necessarily take the time to paint the number, I guess, if that makes sense. You'll see. When I make my dice, I like to make the numbers fairly deep, so when I fill it in, I want to also make sure that I'm filling in those side walls of the number as well. Once it's all filled in nice, then I just take my wet paper towel and wipe off the excess. Piece of cake. Do that for all of them, and then put in the gray for the other numbers. I like to have the high number be kind of accented. The other numbers will be gunmetal, and then do the exact same thing until they are all filled in. Depending on the paint and how fast it dries and how fast you are at putting it in, I like to do 3 or 4 sides at a time before wiping them all. But that's up to you and your skill level, I guess, and the paint that you have. Some of the paints I have, I can only do 1 number at a time before it starts caking and leaving a mess, so it just depends, and you'll get used to it the more you are familiar with your paints. Once you get them all painted, then you're ready to play. Here we go. Level 20 Rogue Sneak Attack. How about a 7th level Cone of Cold? Well, that's it for this video. I hope it's been somewhat helpful for you, or given you some ideas of what you can do to make small, compact dice for your spells, for your higher level characters, or just to share with other people. If you liked this video, make sure to click that thumbs up, subscribe for future videos, and until next time, go ahead and make some sweet spell dice.